Hello and welcome to this week's video. I'm going to be doing two pictures on this page and using mostly plain paper. So I'm using a white paper which has a very definite grid sort of thread through the paper, and also this blue paper which I am presently gutting so that I can use this on another layout, and I'm also going to be using a tiny little bit of it as an embellishment. And I'm also using two pieces of paper which came from a paper pack that I got quite a number of years ago from the works, and I've got about 2 sheets of paper left along with the ones that I've used here. So these two are very faint blue patterns, one with sort of floral pattern in a square, and also some little lined leafed what do you call it, sort of like a trellis type pattern. So I'm going to be layering these up, so I'm kind of getting them into the place where I wanted them. I am actually following a sketch. This is for a challenge on a website, Pear Tree Cut Files, and this was to use a pair of photographs. So I'm not actually using a cut file in this page at all, but I am using a pair of photographs. So now that I've got that layered up where I want it, I'm going to be using a package technique with some pan pastels, or actually just one colour of pan pastels. I am just going to be using the blue, and I'm using it at the moment watered down, so I'm going to get a lighter effect, and I will come in a minute and use it not quite so much water, so that it is a darker pattern as well. You're only going to see part of this when I lay the paper down, so I'm trying to keep to the area where I know that it will be seen. So as you saw me using my heat gun there to dry off some of the paper, and also to roll off some of the excess with a kitchen towel as well, just to get this to dry quickly so that I can continue the page and get this finished in one go today. So this is actually I was doing this page as I say, part of a crop, and this was one of the challenges, and I got about 3 pages done this weekend to add to these crop challenges. And yeah, I really like this layout and wanted it just to be the one colour, and I chose the colour based on the Bramble Fox title that I'm using, which is Everyday Moments. So effectively this is what my page is going to look like. I know exactly where everything's being placed given the sketch that I was working on, and I'm just laying those down to sort of fine tune them, see how wide and long I want these strips of paper, and just make sure that they are right. And I'm quite happy with it. It's actually quite a nice page. I seem to be doing a fair bit of blue, but I just want to dampen the colour down. So I've gotten out my gesso, and I'm just using the gesso with a little bit of water just to try to dampen down the colour a little bit. It was a nice blue, but it didn't it was quite hard against the papers that I've chosen, so the papers are very, very light. So I just really want to just knock this back a little bit so that it's not quite so dark, and just sort of smudge it out a bit. So that's what I'm doing now with the gesso, just adding a little bit more gesso and a little bit more water, and making sure that that is mixed nicely so that when it goes on the page it doesn't clump, and I don't get an area where I've completely whited it out and everywhere else is still blue. I want it to be fairly even and fairly clean sort of finish, so I'm just layering this up very slowly to get the effect that I want. Again, coming in there with my heat gun just to dry that off. Drying it off on the back as well helps the paper not warp quite so much if you dry from the top and from the bottom. If you just dry from one side, on one side of the paper, you tend to get the paper warping a lot more. And this paper is a very good quality sort of linen paper, so it doesn't it takes a lot to warp it, but I just wanted to be on the safe side. So I'm just coming in with a little bit of washi tape. I like to use the washi tape on the back of the frame here so that I can get it in the exact position that I want it. And then I usually come in and add some glue. Not a huge fan of washi tape. I find that over time it always seems to lift, so I'm not relying on this to hold the back frame onto my white cardstock. I was just using it, and I usually just use it just to secure it in the interim. So now I'm just going to cut these down a little bit because they were too long for what I wanted, and I'm just going to arrange these and see how I like them and how thick I want them to be. Just looking at that piece and thinking to myself that actually I would like the blue across the top, across the side and across the bottom as well. So I've just cut that cut it down, and it's a little bit thinner than the other pieces, but actually I don't mind that. You can't, because I've layered them on top of one another, you can't actually tell that I started off with the piece of paper being exactly the same thickness. I have to note with this everyday word, when I pulled the backing off, I was a little bit rough with it. So I did separate the EV from the rest of the word very. It did break, but the perspectives, when they glued down really nice, and when they do break, which is not very often, but when they do break, they do break cleanly, so that when you pop them back down again, you can't notice that they were ever broken in half. So I just thought I should bring that to your attention. It is very thin in some places, this writing, but that's one of the reasons why I liked it so much. So I'm just coming in with some glue. I placed these exactly where I wanted them, and I really didn't want to move them because I know whenever I pull anything off and I place it down where I want it, when I place it down after I'm gluing, I always move it a little bit, and I'm not always happy that I have done that. And once the glue's on, you're pretty much scuppered in trying to move it. So that's why I was sticking these down like this, and sort of sticking one end and then lifting them up and going in and sticking the rest, because I really did like the layering on these pieces, and as I say, I knew I would never get it quite the same way. Now, my pictures, as I said in my last video, or one of my last videos, I'm asked not to show pictures of the children, so you can see that on top of the photographs there I have my logo so that you can't see the photographs. So these are two photographs from Snapchat, so they both have some writing along the base. One says what you having for dinner, and the other one says I'm making laksa. So this is my daughter at university doing some cooking and very nicely asking and inquiring about what we were doing back home. So I thought I would add that in here, and they're two lovely photographs. So they just matched these words, the everyday moments, because they are just everyday simple moments, but they're nice to document some of them. So I'm now going to be gluing down the Bramble Fox. This, again, as I always do, I am using glossy accents to glue it down. I absolutely love glossy accents, and I use it for a lot of things. Anything that's not paper, basically, because it really does stick things, and I find that they then stay in place and they don't go anywhere. So I'm just looking at this and thinking it just needs a little bit of something, just a whisper of something. So I have pulled out a Versamark colour ink pad in a very light grey, and I'm going to pop this down just at the top and at the side of the photograph, just to give a very, very, very light hint. I mean, it's one of those blink and you'll miss it, you barely can see it, but when you look close you can see it, and it just seems to finish the page off a little bit better than it was looking. It just needed a little bit of something else. I have to say, I often do, when I do a monochrome sort of page, I often do then come in with a tiny bit, a hint of something, and actually The reason for this is because I also found some other prospectus pieces that I'm going to bring out shortly, which is a knife and a fork, which I thought would be really nice. Here I've got them. So I'm putting the knife and the fork down at the bottom of the title and kind of pointing towards my writing. And those are a very light grey. So I figured the hearts just dotted around in a few places around the photograph, sort of bring in that element together. And then of course I'm writing in a grey ink pen, just writing the date, and I've written, look at you, always asking after me while you're making your own dinner. Love you loads. So just a little bit of documenting every day. And yeah, the hearts that I put on the stamp, there's also a heart on the filter on one of the pictures that says love, and it has a little heart next to it, so that kind of ties it in as well. So I really do like this page. I just wanted one more little touch, which is to add some Spiegelmum's sequins in here. And these are a very pale pink and a light blue. So it gives a touch of a little bit more colour in here. So I'm adding in, they actually were green. There are actually very light green ones in this pack as well. Though most of them are various shades of blue. So I was picking out the green ones so that I'm not going to use those because they didn't really go. And I'm just using my tool here, which is a rubber tipped like pen, and it just picks up the sequins really nicely, and pick them up and pop them down onto the glue. And this is my page all completed. So in goes my cat, which sits perfectly at the top of the everyday. And this is the page completed. So I've got some stills here for you to have a look at. I hope you've enjoyed this page, and I'll see you again next week. Thanks, bye.